The ordinary beginning Alex and Ethan were twins who had grown up together in a quiet town where nothing big ever happened. From the day they were born, people treated them like a single soul split into two bodies. They looked the same, talked the same, and even laughed at the same silly things. Teachers at school often confused them. Neighbors always asked, "Which one are you again?" And their friends teased them, saying they were copies of each other made by a machine. Despite all of this, the twins loved their bond. They felt safe knowing they always had someone who understood them without words. Alex was a little more serious, the one who liked reading late at night, while Ethan was louder and loved making jokes. But those small differences didn't matter. To the world, they were identical, and to each other, they were brothers who shared everything. Their life was simple. They went to college, worked part-time jobs, and hung out with friends. On weekends, they played basketball at the local park or watched movies with bowls of popcorn so big they could barely finish them. Nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary. One rainy afternoon, while stopping at a pharmacy to pick up some snacks and medicine for their mother, Alex noticed a display near the counter. It was a small cardboard stand with bright letters that read, "Discover who you really are. DNA test kits available here." Ethan chuckled and nudged his brother. "Hey, what if we try this? Maybe it will tell us which one of us is smarter." Alex rolled his eyes but smiled. "It'll probably just say we're twins." Waste of money, but Ethan grabbed a box anyway. "Come on, it'll be fun." "Who knows? Maybe we'll find out we're secretly related to royalty." The cashier scanned the kit, and the twins carried it home, laughing about the idea. For them, it was just another adventure, like trying out a new video game or testing who could eat the spiciest chips. They never thought it would mean anything serious. That night, sitting at their kitchen table, they followed the instructions. The kit asked them to spit into small tubes and seal them with the caps provided. Ethan joked, "This is the weirdest homework assignment ever." Alex shrugged. "Well, let's get it over with." They sealed the tubes, placed them inside the prepaid envelope, and dropped it in the mailbox the next morning. Then, like anyone else, they forgot about it. Days passed. Weeks rolled by. Life continued in its ordinary rhythm. Alex studied late nights for exams. Ethan worked extra hours at his job. Their mother cooked dinner and asked about their day. Everything seemed the same. Until one afternoon, Alex checked his email. A subject line blinked at him. "Your DNA test results are ready." His heart skipped a beat, but not out of fear, out of curiosity. He shouted for Ethan, who came running, half a sandwich still in his hand. "Finally!" Ethan grinned. "Let's see how royal we are." They clicked the link and logged in. But instead of a simple confirmation saying identical twins, the screen filled with words and charts that didn't make sense. Alex leaned closer, frowning. Ethan stopped chewing. "What does this mean?" Alex whispered. The results showed something strange. Their DNA profiles were not identical at all. In fact, the system flagged differences that should not exist if they were truly identical twins. Even stranger, one section highlighted a warning. Possible match to criminal database. "Further review required." The laughter faded. The sandwich dropped from Ethan's hand onto the floor. Both brothers stared at the screen, frozen. "This has to be a mistake," Ethan muttered. "They mixed up our samples." Alex nodded slowly, though his face was pale. "Yeah, must be." But deep inside, neither of them could shake the cold feeling creeping up their spine. For the first time in their lives, the word ordinary no longer described them. They decided not to tell anyone right away. Instead, they made an appointment with their family doctor, Dr. Carter, to help explain what the results meant. Maybe it was just a technical error. Maybe the system had glitched. Surely, it couldn't mean what it looked like. The appointment was scheduled for the following week. Until then, Alex and Ethan tried to go on with life as if nothing had changed. But every time Ethan looked at his brother, he felt a question burning inside him. What if we're not the same after all? Alex, too, lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what secrets their DNA might be hiding. He had always believed he knew who he was. He had always believed he knew who his brother was. But that test result had cracked open a door neither of them wanted to walk through. And when the day of the appointment finally arrived, they would discover that this door led not just to questions about their identity, but into a nightmare neither of them could ever have imagined. Because when Dr. Carter saw the results with his own eyes, he wouldn't just frown or shake his head. He would panic, and within minutes, he would call 911. Strange results. The morning of their doctor's appointment arrived, and Alex and Ethan sat nervously in the waiting room. The clinic smelled faintly of disinfectant, and the sound of people coughing and papers shuffling filled the air. They had come here 100 times before for simple checkups, but this time felt different. This time, there was a shadow hanging over them. Dr. Carter, a man they had known since childhood, greeted them warmly at first. His voice was calm, but his eyes seemed sharper than usual. "Come in, boys, sit down. Let's take a look at what you've brought me." Alex handed him the printed copy of the DNA results. At first, the doctor scanned the pages casually, adjusting his glasses as if he expected nothing unusual. But as his eyes moved further down the paper, his face began to change. The easy smile vanished. His forehead wrinkled. His hands stiffened, holding the paper tighter than before. Ethan noticed. "Doc, what's wrong?" Dr. Carter didn't answer right away. Instead, he kept rereading the same lines, as though his brain refused to believe what he was seeing. He flipped between pages, double-checking the numbers and genetic codes. The silence in the room grew heavy. Finally, he looked up, his voice low and uneasy. "These results, they're not what I expected. You two, you're not identical twins." The words dropped like a stone into water. Alex blinked, confused. Ethan leaned back, shaking his head. "That can't be right," Ethan said quickly.
"We've been told our whole lives that we're identical."
"Everyone says so. We look the same." "I know," Dr. Carter replied carefully. "But DNA doesn't lie. There are significant differences between you two. That means you are not genetically identical. And there's more." He hesitated, his eyes flickering nervously to the second page. Alex felt his throat tighten. "What more?" Dr. Carter lowered his voice as though someone might be listening outside. "One of these DNA profiles has triggered a match in a criminal database. It says there's a connection to an unsolved case. A violent one." The twins stared at him, stunned. Ethan laughed nervously, trying to push away the fear crawling up his chest. "That's impossible. We've never even been in trouble. We're not criminals. I'm not saying you are," Dr. Carter said firmly, but his hands were shaking slightly as he folded the paper. "But someone with extremely close DNA to one of you is connected to a serious crime. And that means the system believes one of you is directly tied to that case." The room felt smaller, suffocating. Alex could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears. He wanted to argue, to say the system had to be wrong, but something about Dr. Carter's tone told him this was real. Too real. Ethan leaned forward, his voice trembling now. "So what does that mean? That one of us has some secret life?" Dr. Carter shook his head quickly. "No, I don't think that's it. But I can't ignore this. I have an obligation. I need to report this immediately." Both brothers froze. "Report it," Alex repeated. "Yes," Dr. Carter said, standing up. He walked briskly to his office phone. "I need to contact the authorities. This isn't just about medicine anymore. This is a matter of law. Wait, Doc, no." Ethan stood up, panic in his eyes. "You can't just call the cops on us. We haven't done anything wrong." Dr. Carter raised his hand firmly, silencing him. "Listen to me. I've known you boys since you were children. I don't believe either of you is guilty of anything. But this isn't a small matter. These results link one of your profiles to a federal database. If I don't call this in, and it turns out to be important, I could lose my license, or worse, let something dangerous slip through the cracks." He dialed the number. The twins exchanged a terrified glance. For the first time in their lives, they felt powerless. They weren't just two young men sitting in a doctor's office anymore. They were suspects. On the other end of the line, a voice answered. Dr. Carter's tone was urgent, almost frantic. "This is Dr. Carter. I have two patients here, twins. Their DNA results indicate a match with an active criminal case. I need immediate law enforcement assistance." Alex's stomach dropped. Ethan's legs felt weak, and he sank back into the chair. The doctor hung up and faced them with a grave look. "The police are on their way. I'm sorry, boys, but this is out of my hands now." The room fell silent again, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Each second felt like an eternity. Alex finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, what if this isn't a mistake? What if this means we don't really know everything about our family? Ethan didn't answer. He stared at the floor, his mind spinning with questions he couldn't even form. Then, in the distance, they heard it, the wailing sound of sirens growing louder, approaching the clinic. Red and blue lights began to flash against the window blinds. Alex's hands clenched into fists. Ethan's breath came faster and sharper. Neither of them had ever been in trouble with the law before. Yet here they were, about to be confronted by police for something they didn't even understand. And as the sirens grew louder, they realized that their lives would never return to the ordinary beginning they once knew. Because from this moment forward, everything would change. The doctor's fear inside. The small clinic room. The twins sat stiffly on their chairs, staring at Dr. Carter, who now looked like a man carrying the weight of a terrible secret. His face had gone pale, and his hands wouldn't stop trembling. The cheerful family doctor who once gave them lollipops after vaccines was gone. In his place stood someone who seemed almost afraid of them. The sirens outside grew louder, until the flashing red and blue lights painted the white walls of the clinic. Ethan's stomach twisted. He turned to Alex, whispering, "This can't be happening. He knows us. He knows we didn't do anything." But Alex saw the fear in the doctor's eyes. And fear, he realized, could turn even friends into strangers. Dr. Carter paced the room nervously, glancing at the door every few seconds. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Listen, boys. I don't think you've done anything wrong, but the system doesn't care what I think. It only cares about the evidence." He tapped the printed DNA results with his finger. "And this evidence screams trouble." Ethan shook his head, almost shouting, "Then explain to them. Tell them who we are. You've known us all our lives. Tell them this has to be a mistake." But Dr. Carter's voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with dread. "It's not that simple. The DNA match isn't some minor thing. It's connected to a case I've heard whispers about. A violent case. The kind the authorities don't ignore." The air in the room grew heavy. Alex felt sweat trickle down the back of his neck. "What kind of case?" he asked carefully. Dr. Carter didn't answer right away. He rubbed his forehead as though trying to push the words out. Finally, he muttered, "Years ago, there was a series of attacks. Brutal ones. The suspect vanished without a trace. The only thing they had left was DNA found at the scenes. That DNA sat in the database all this time, waiting for a match. And now..." He looked at Ethan with eyes full of pity. "Now one of you triggered it." Ethan's blood ran cold. His voice cracked. "You're saying my DNA makes me look like some monster?" "I'm saying," Dr. Carter replied softly, "that your DNA connects you to someone who is." The room fell silent again, but it was not the comfortable silence of trust. It was the heavy silence of suspicion and fear. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. The sound of radios crackling and boots hitting the floor filled the air. The police had arrived. Ethan's heart raced. He looked at Alex, panic flashing in his eyes. "What do we do? If they think we're guilty?" Alex grabbed his brother's shoulder firmly, his voice steady, even though his own chest was pounding. "We tell the truth. That's all we can do." The door burst open. Two officers stepped inside, hands resting on their holstered weapons. A third officer stayed in the doorway, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. "Dr. Carter," one of them said sharply, "you called in a DNA match?" Dr. Carter nodded quickly, holding out the papers with shaking hands. "Yes, these are the results. The profiles match the federal database. I didn't want to risk ignoring it." The officer snatched the papers, scanning them fast. His face remained hard, unreadable. Then his eyes shifted to the twins. "Names?" "Alex and Ethan," Dr. Carter answered quickly. The officer pointed. "Stand up." "Both of you." Ethan froze, his legs refusing to move. Alex stood slowly, pulling his brother up beside him. The officer studied them, as though expecting one of them to break into a confession right there. But all he saw were two frightened young men, confused and trembling. Still, the law didn't deal in feelings. "Hands where we can see them," the officer ordered. Ethan raised his hands slowly, his voice desperate. "Please, you don't understand." "We didn't do anything." The officer's expression didn't soften. He motioned to his partner. "Separate them. We'll take them down to the station." At that moment, Dr. Carter stepped forward, his voice cracking. Wait, please, these are good boys. I've known them since they were children. They've never been in trouble. You can't just treat them like criminals." The officer gave him a hard look. "Doctor, with all due respect, your job was to report the match. You've done that. Now it's our job. If they're innocent, the investigation will show it." Ethan's chest tightened as he heard those words. If they're innocent, as if guilt was already assumed. Dr. Carter's shoulders slumped. For a moment, it looked like he wanted to say more, to defend them, but fear sealed his lips. He had already risked enough by speaking. As the officers moved closer, Alex locked eyes with the doctor. His voice was calm, but his words were sharp. "You've known us our whole lives, Doc, but right now you look at us like strangers." "Why?" Dr. Carter's lips trembled. He couldn't find the right answer. The truth was, he didn't know. The fear inside him had taken over, and as the twins were escorted out of the room, surrounded by flashing lights and stern faces, Dr. Carter stood frozen by his desk, the guilt weighing on him like a mountain, because in his heart, he didn't believe the twins were guilty. But in his mind, he couldn't silence the terrifying question that had started it all. What if the DNA is right? The arrival of police. The flashing red and blue lights outside the clinic grew brighter, reflecting off the glass doors. People in the waiting area stopped what they were doing. Some clutched their children closer. Others whispered nervously, wondering what crime had taken place. Few of them realized that the reason for all this noise and panic was sitting quietly in the back room. Two young men who had only taken a DNA test for fun. Alex and Ethan were led out of Dr. Carter's office, their arms stiff at their sides, watched closely by two uniformed officers. The air in the hallway was tense. Patients and nurses turned to stare as the twins were marched toward the front of the clinic. "Are those the twins?" A nurse whispered. "I've seen them since they were little. They're good boys." "They must have done something," someone else muttered. "Police don't show up like this for nothing." The twins kept their heads down, shame and confusion washing over them. Their hearts pounded as they stepped into the cool outside air, where several squad cars were parked in a row. Officers moved with purpose, their radios buzzing with short-clipped messages. "Put them in separate cars," one officer barked. Ethan froze, panic shooting through him. "Wait, no, we didn't do anything. You can't just take us away like this." His words were swallowed by the commotion. An officer guided him firmly toward one vehicle, while another led Alex to a different one. The brothers exchanged a quick, desperate glance before being shut inside, their reflections trapped in the tinted glass. For the first time in their lives, Alex and Ethan were truly apart, separated by steel and suspicion. Inside the car, Alex pressed his forehead against the window, trying to steady his breathing. He thought of his mother, who would surely be waiting at home, clueless about what was happening. How would she react when police showed up at her door, asking questions about her sons? Meanwhile, Ethan sat in the other car, his legs bouncing uncontrollably. He couldn't stop replaying the doctor's words. DNA match. Violent case. Unsolved. None of it made sense. He wanted to scream, to demand someone explain it properly. But he also knew that anything he said could be twisted, taken the wrong way. The convoy of police cars started moving, lights flashing, sirens off, but presence heavy. People on the sidewalk stopped to stare as the line of vehicles rolled past. To strangers, it looked like dangerous criminals were being transported. To Alex and Ethan, it felt like the end of the world they knew. Back at the clinic, Dr. Carter stood frozen near the doorway, watching the cars disappear into the distance. His chest felt tight, and guilt weighed heavily on his conscience. He had done his duty as a doctor, but as a man who had watched those twins grow up, he felt like a traitor. One of the nurses approached him, whispering, "Doctor, what's going on? Why were the police here for Alex and Ethan?" Dr. Carter shook his head slowly. I can't say. All I know is that the truth is far more complicated than it looks." But deep inside, he was asking himself a haunting question. Had he just ruined the lives of two innocent boys? At the police station, the twins were separated again, taken down two different hallways lined with cold gray walls. Each was placed in a small interrogation room, a metal table in the center, a camera watching from above. The atmosphere screamed accusation. Alex sat still, his hands clasped tightly. He tried to calm himself by repeating the truth in his head. I didn't do anything. Ethan didn't do anything. We're innocent. Ethan, however, was less composed. His legs shook under the table and sweat gathered at his temples. He had never been in trouble before, not even a school suspension. And now here he was, being treated like a criminal. The door opened in each room almost at the same time. Detectives entered, serious men with tired eyes, holding folders filled with papers. They didn't sit right away. They looked at the twins as if studying them, as if trying to see guilt written across their faces. "Do you know why you're here?" one detective asked Alex. "No," Alex answered firmly. "Do you?" the other detective asked Ethan. Ethan shook his head. "Because of a mistake." The detectives opened their folders and spread photographs on the table. Disturbing images, crime scenes from years ago, blood, broken glass, places that looked nothing like the twins' quiet hometown. "These," the detective told Alex, "are from a series of attacks that happened almost 15 years ago. The DNA found at the scenes was entered into a federal database. For years there was no match. Until now," Alex's jaw clenched. "That doesn't make sense. We were just kids back then. Children." "And yet," the detective replied coldly, tapping the papers, "your brother's DNA matches the profile." Ethan, in his own room, was hearing the same words. His throat went dry. He pushed the photos back. "This isn't possible. I was a child. I was hundreds of miles away. I didn't do this." The detective leaned forward. "Then explain why your DNA says otherwise." Ethan had no answer. He sat frozen, the weight of the accusation crushing him. Back at home, their mother sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea. The clock ticked softly on the wall. She had no idea what storm was about to crash into her quiet house. She believed her boys were safe, perhaps hanging out with friends. But soon, she too would be dragged into the nightmare that had begun with nothing more than a simple test kit at the pharmacy. And at the station, the twins realized something chilling. This wasn't just about science or mistakes. This was about secrets buried in their family's past, secrets that were about to be dragged out into the light. The interrogation. The cold metal table between Alex and the detective seemed like a wall separating innocence from accusation. The overhead light buzzed faintly, casting harsh shadows across the small room. Alex sat straight, his hands clasped tightly, trying to appear calm, though his heart hammered in his chest. The detective flipped through his folder slowly, as if savoring the silence before striking. "Alex," he began, his tone steady but sharp, "you say you've never been in trouble with the law. You say your brother hasn't either. But do you know what these DNA results tell us?" Alex forced himself to meet the man's eyes. "They tell you there's been a mistake," the detective smirked, leaning forward. "Mistakes don't trigger a federal database. Mistakes don't bring us unsolved crimes back from the dead. Your brother's DNA is a match, Alex. Not partial, full match. Do you understand what that means?" Alex swallowed hard, refusing to look away. "It means the system is wrong. My brother is not a criminal. He's never hurt anyone." The detective studied him for a long moment, then scribbled something in his notes. "You're loyal. That's good, but loyalty doesn't erase facts." In the other room, Ethan sat with his own detective. His breathing was shallow, his palms sweaty. He had never felt so trapped. The detective spread the photos out again. "Look at them, Ethan. Look at the scenes. Families torn apart. Lives destroyed. DNA doesn't lie. And your DNA was found there." Ethan shook his head quickly, his voice trembling. "I was a kid. I wasn't even in that state back then. How could my DNA be there?" The detective leaned closer, his eyes piercing. "That's what we want you to explain. If you weren't there, then who was? Do you have a twin we don't know about? A clone? Some secret life?" Ethan's voice cracked. "No! I only have Alex, that's it. We've lived in the same house, gone to the same schools. You can check. Everyone knows us." The detective's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then why, Ethan, does your DNA scream guilt?" Ethan had no answer. He could only repeat the same desperate truth. "Because it's wrong. Because I didn't do it." Back in Alex's room, the detective changed tactics. He placed a family photo on the table, one that must have been pulled from their mother's records. It showed Alex and Ethan as children, smiling with ice cream cones in their hands. "You've lived a clean life," the detective admitted. "Good grades, no arrests, no fights. But sometimes," he tapped the photo, "good lives hide dark secrets." "Is your brother capable of things you don't know about?" Alex's eyes narrowed. "No, you can dig all you want, but you won't find anything. We've been side by side every step of the way. If you think Ethan did something, then you're saying I did too. And I know I didn't." The detective leaned back, arms crossed. "Interesting point." He scribbled more notes, his expression unreadable. Meanwhile, Ethan's interrogation grew more intense. The detective slid a piece of paper toward him. "Sign a statement admitting you were at the scene. Tell us what happened. It'll go easier for you." Ethan recoiled as if the paper were on fire. "I'm not signing something that isn't true." The detective's voice turned icy. "Then you're making this harder on yourself." Tears burned at the corners of Ethan's eyes, but he clenched his fists. "I'm not lying just because your system says I should. I'm innocent." The detective studied him, searching for cracks in his resolve. But Ethan held firm, even though inside he felt like he was breaking apart. Hours passed. The brothers were grilled again and again, asked the same questions in different ways. The detectives searched for contradictions, for signs of weakness. But the truth remained steady. Alex and Ethan had no idea why the DNA said what it did. Finally, both detectives stepped out, leaving the twins alone in their separate rooms. Cameras kept rolling, but the silence returned. Alex leaned back exhausted. Ethan buried his face in his hands. In that silence, both brothers realized something frightening. This wasn't just about proving they hadn't committed a crime. This was about uncovering something buried deep in their past, something they had never been told. Later that evening, their mother was brought to the station. She looked pale and shaken, clutching her purse tightly. When she saw her sons through the glass window of the holding area, her eyes filled with tears. She pressed her hand against the glass, whispering their names. The detectives pulled her aside. "Ma'am, we need answers. Your son's DNA has matched with an old case. Did you ever adopt? Is there something about their birth we should know?" At first, she shook her head firmly. "No, they're my boys. Both of them." But as the questions grew sharper, her voice began to tremble. Her eyes darted toward her sons, then back to the detectives. And then, like a dam breaking, the truth began to slip. I never told them. I didn't want them to grow up with the burden." The detectives leaned in. "Didn't tell them what?" Her hands shook as she clutched her purse tighter. One of them isn't mine by blood." The words shattered the silence. The detectives exchanged quick looks. Behind the glass, Alex and Ethan couldn't hear the details, but they saw their mother crying, her shoulders trembling. Alex pressed his hand to the glass, whispering to himself, "What is she saying?" Ethan stared, his heart pounding, dread spreading through him. They didn't know it yet, but the darkest family secret was finally beginning to surface. Family secrets revealed. The interrogation room was tense, but the hallway outside was heavier still. Their mother sat in a chair, her hands gripping the edges of her purse so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. For years she had buried the truth, convincing herself it was for the best. But now, under the bright lights of the police station, with her sons watching her through the glass, the secret she had carried was clawing its way out. The detective leaned forward, his voice calm but unrelenting. "Mrs. Harper, this isn't the time to protect anyone. Your son's DNA is tied to a violent case. If you know something, you need to tell us. Now." She shook her head slowly, her lips trembling. "They're good boys. They don't deserve this. No one's saying they're guilty," the detective pressed. "But something doesn't add up. The tests say they're not identical twins. And now the match. Please help us understand." For a long moment, she sat in silence, as if debating whether to speak. Then she took a deep breath, her voice breaking. "Ethan he isn't biologically mine." The detectives exchanged quick glances. "Go on," one urged gently. She closed her eyes, memories flooding back. 20 years ago, when Alex was born, he had a twin. But there were complications. The doctors told me one twin didn't make it. I was devastated. My husband and I mourned, but then her voice cracked as she covered her face with her hands. Then, a few months later, a baby boy came into our lives through circumstances I never fully understood. He needed a home. He needed parents. We took him in. I told myself it was fate, that Alex had lost his twin, but God had given me another. Her tears fell faster now. We raised them as brothers. I swore I would never let them feel different. They grew up believing they were identical, and I never corrected anyone. I thought it didn't matter. Family is love, not blood. Isn't it? The detectives sat stunned. One finally asked, "Do you know anything about Ethan's biological family?" She shook her head helplessly. Nothing. The adoption wasn't official. It was quiet, private, almost secret. My husband never wanted to talk about it. He said the past was dangerous and we should move on. When he passed away, I kept the secret locked away. I didn't want Ethan to feel unwanted. Behind the glass, Alex and Ethan watched, confusion carved across their faces. They couldn't hear her words, but they could see her collapse into tears. Alex pressed his forehead against the glass, his chest tightening. Ethan's hands trembled against the cold surface, his mind screaming for answers. Inside the room, the detective leaned closer. "Mrs. Harper, think carefully. A private adoption. No records? Do you realize what that means? Whoever gave Ethan to you may have had a reason for hiding his past." Her eyes widened with fresh fear. "Are you saying—" "His family?" The detective nodded grimly. "It's possible Ethan is related by blood to the suspect we've been hunting for years. That's why his DNA triggered the system. He isn't the killer, but he may share enough markers to link him to whoever is." Her body shook as the truth sank in. She had tried so hard to shield her sons, but her silence had only made the storm worse. Moments later, the detectives entered the observation room where Alex and Ethan waited. Their faces were pale, but their voices were calm and firm. "Ethan," one detective said, "we need to tell you something about your past." Ethan's heart pounded. "What past?" The detective hesitated, glancing at Alex before answering. "You weren't born into the Harper family. You were adopted, quietly, and your biological relatives may be tied to the crimes we're investigating." The room spun. Ethan stumbled back a step, his mind struggling to process the words. "Adopted?" His voice was barely a whisper. That's not true. We're twins." "We've always been twins?" Alex rushed to his side, gripping his arm firmly. "We are twins," Alex said fiercely. "Blood or not, you're my brother. Nothing changes that." But Ethan's world felt like it was crumbling beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about himself, his identity, his place in the world, suddenly seemed like a lie. The detectives continued, their tone more cautious now. "Ethan, listen carefully. You are not being accused of these crimes. But the match tells us someone connected to you by blood, likely a father, brother, or close relative, is the one we've been searching for. We need your cooperation to track them down." Ethan's legs gave out, and he sank into the chair. His hands shook violently as he buried his face in them. "All this because of a stupid test kit. All this because I spit into a tube." Alex knelt beside him, his voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together. We'll get through it." Ethan looked at his brother, his eyes red with tears. "But what if my blood is cursed, Alex? What if I'm tied to monsters?" Alex gripped his shoulder firmly. "Then we'll prove you're nothing like them. You're not defined by their sins. You're my brother. That's all that matters." The detectives watched silently, realizing they were seeing something raw. Two brothers holding on to each other while the truth tried to tear them apart. Meanwhile, their mother sat in another room, her sobs echoing through the hallway. She had spent years protecting her secret, but the secret had grown into a storm. And now her sons were standing in the middle of it. Their lives forever changed. What had begun as a fun experiment had uncovered a hidden bloodline, a violent legacy, and a fugitive still lurking in the shadows. The past was no longer buried, and the twins, once ordinary, were now bound to a mystery that demanded answers. The shocking twist. The air inside the police station grew colder as the hours dragged on. The twins sat in separate rooms, their lives turned upside down, while detectives pieced together the new puzzle. Papers shuffled, phones rang, and computer keys clicked, as investigators dug deeper into Ethan's mysterious past. Finally, the lead detective entered the room where Ethan and Alex now sat together, allowed to reunite after hours of questioning. His face was stern, but his eyes revealed something else, an urgency, a new discovery. He set a thick folder on the table with a heavy thud. "We've traced the DNA," he said, his voice sharp and direct. "Ethan, you're not the suspect, but you are biologically related to him, closely. The match suggests he's your half-brother." The words hit like a thunderclap. Ethan blinked, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Alex stared at the detective in disbelief. "Half-brother?" Ethan repeated, his voice shaking. That's impossible. I don't even know who my real father is. How could I have a half-brother tied to murder?" The detective opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. A man's face stared back at them. Hardened, cold, eyes that carried shadows of violence. "This is Marcus Hale, a fugitive wanted for a string of brutal crimes 15 years ago. He vanished before authorities could catch him. DNA evidence was all we had, until now." Ethan's hands trembled as he picked up the photo. For a moment he saw nothing but darkness in those eyes, and then faintly a chill swept through him, because he recognized something familiar. The jawline, the curve of the brow, a reflection of himself. He dropped the photo, his voice cracking. No, that can't be true. "I don't know him?" Alex slammed his fist against the table, glaring at the detective. "Don't dump this on him. He's not responsible for someone else's crimes. He's never even met this man," the detective nodded. "We know, Ethan isn't guilty. But Marcus is his blood. That connection changes everything. It means Marcus may have been hiding all these years. But through Ethan, we now have a way to find him." The twins sat in stunned silence. Ethan's mind swirled with questions that had no answers. Who was Marcus to him? Why had his mother hidden the truth? And what kind of life had his blood brother lived that his very name sent fear through the room? The detective continued. "We believe Marcus had a relationship with your biological mother before you were born. That makes him your half-brother. When your mother gave you up, however it happened, Marcus disappeared from the records. But your DNA has reopened the trail." Ethan's chest tightened. "So I've been walking around my whole life with the blood of a criminal inside me." Without even knowing, Alex leaned closer, his voice firm. "No, you've been walking around with my brother beside me. That's all you are. Don't let them twist it." The detective cleared his throat. "This isn't about guilt by blood. It's about justice. With your DNA, we can build a clearer family tree. We can track Marcus's connections. And if you're willing to cooperate, you may help us finally catch him." Ethan stared at the photo again, his mind torn. He wanted nothing more than to throw it away, to reject the connection. But deep inside, he realized that whether he liked it or not, his existence had become the key to capturing a monster. As night fell, the police station buzzed with activity. Investigators ran searches, compared family records, and mapped out Marcus's old associates. Ethan sat quietly, lost in thought, while Alex never left his side. At one point, Ethan whispered, "What if he comes after me, Alex? What if he finds out I exist?" Alex gripped his brother's shoulder. "Then he'll have to go through me first. You're not alone in this." For the first time since the ordeal began, Ethan managed a faint smile. His brother's loyalty was the one solid thing in a world that suddenly felt like quicksand. Hours later, the detective returned with news that made the air electric. "We've confirmed Marcus's last location. He's alive. And with Ethan's DNA match, we have enough evidence to reopen the manhunt. The FBI is already preparing to move." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Alive after all these years?" The detective nodded. "And dangerous. Very dangerous. But this time we have the edge." Alex's jaw tightened. "So what happens to us now?" The detective looked directly at Ethan. "You stay under protection. Until Marcus is caught, you'll be considered a potential target. He may see you as a threat, or as a loose end." Ethan's blood ran cold. He had started this journey with a silly decision to take a DNA test. Now he was being told that a violent fugitive might come looking for him. Back at home, their mother sat alone in her room, the weight of her confession crushing her. She had tried to shield her sons, but by hiding the truth, she had only delayed the storm. Now Ethan's true bloodline had surfaced, and with it, a danger she could never have imagined. Meanwhile, at the police station, Ethan looked again at the photo of Marcus Hale. His reflection. His half-brother. His curse. Alex placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not him. Don't ever forget that." Ethan nodded slowly, though the fear in his chest remained. Because somewhere out there, Marcus Hale was alive, and now he knew someone with his blood was finally on the radar. For Marcus, that could mean two things: run deeper into the shadows, or strike first. And for Ethan, it meant one thing only: his life would never be ordinary again. Resolution and reflection. The night stretched long at the police station. Ethan and Alex sat side by side in a quiet waiting room, their thoughts heavy. The world they once knew had shattered in just a few days. What began as a harmless test had exposed family secrets, opened old wounds, and awakened the shadow of a man named Marcus Hale. The door opened suddenly, and the lead detective walked in. His expression was serious but focused. "We've found him," he said simply. Ethan's chest tightened. "Marcus?" The detective nodded. "He's been hiding under a false name in a small town 2 states away. With the DNA link, we were able to track relatives and connect the dots. We're moving in tonight. The FBI is already coordinating." Alex clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "And what about Ethan? What happens to him?" The detective's gaze softened. "He'll remain under protection until Marcus is caught. But once this is over, Ethan's name will be cleared publicly. He's not a suspect. He's the key to ending this." Ethan swallowed hard, struggling with emotions that pulled him in every direction. Relief that Marcus had been found. Fear of what Marcus might do if he realized he had a half-brother. And a strange, unwanted sadness. Sadness that someone carrying his blood had lived a life built on violence. The next day, news reports flashed across every screen. Fugitive Marcus Hale captured after 15 years on the run. Helicopter footage showed black SUVs surrounding a rundown farmhouse. Armed agents moved with precision, breaking through doors. Minutes later, Marcus Hale was dragged out in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage, his eyes cold. Ethan and Alex watched the coverage in silence from a safe house. The sight of Marcus unsettled Ethan to his core. The man looked so much like him, older, harder, but undeniably similar. The same jawline, the same eyes, a reflection twisted by a darker path. Alex noticed his brother's stare and placed a hand on his shoulder. "He may share your face, but he doesn't share your heart." Ethan blinked back tears. "But the world will always know. They'll say I'm related to him. They'll see me and think of him." Alex shook his head firmly. "No, the world will see you for who you are. Not who he is. You're my brother, Ethan. That's the only truth that matters." Days later, Marcus's arrest became national news. Reporters dug into his violent past, detailing crimes that chilled anyone who read them. But alongside those stories, another one began to spread. The story of the twins who uncovered a hidden bloodline through a simple DNA test. For the first time, Ethan's name appeared not as a suspect, but as the reason justice had finally caught up to a fugitive. The headlines painted him as the unexpected hero, though Ethan didn't feel like one. One evening, as he sat with Alex and their mother at the dinner table, the silence was broken by Ethan's voice. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" he asked softly, looking at his mother, her eyes filled with tears. "Because I wanted you to feel safe, to feel loved. I thought if I told you, you'd grow up with questions, with pain. I wanted you to believe you were just like Alex. I never wanted you to feel different." Ethan's throat tightened, but he nodded slowly. "I understand. You were trying to protect me, but secrets, they don't stay buried forever. They come back." His mother wiped her tears. "You're right, and I'm sorry. If I could do it again, I would tell you the truth from the start." Alex leaned forward, his tone steady. "We can't change the past, but we can move forward, together." As weeks passed, the storm began to calm. Marcus Hale was locked behind bars, facing trial for crimes that would keep him imprisoned for life. The fear of him lurking in the shadows was gone. But for Ethan, the journey wasn't just about safety. It was about identity. He had to accept that his bloodline was complicated, messy, even dangerous. Yet at the same time, he realized that blood alone didn't define who he was. His choices did. One night, sitting with Alex on the porch of their home, Ethan finally voiced the thought that had haunted him since the beginning. What if people always see me as Marcus's brother? What if that's all I'll ever be to them? Alex looked out at the stars before answering. Then let them see. And let them also see the truth, that you're nothing like him. You're the one who helped bring him down. You're the one who stood tall when everything tried to crush you. You're not his shadow, Ethan. You're your own man. Ethan breathed deeply, the weight in his chest lifting slightly. For the first time in weeks, he felt hope. In the end, the DNA test that started as a joke had reshaped their lives forever. It had dragged out secrets, uncovered hidden ties, and exposed them to fear they never imagined. But it had also proven something stronger than blood. Alex and Ethan were brothers, not because they shared identical DNA, but because they had chosen to stand by each other no matter what. As Ethan watched the sunrise the next morning, he whispered to himself, "I'm not Marcus Hale's brother. I'm Alex Harper's brother, and that's all I need to be." For the first time since the nightmare began, he smiled, because the truth, though painful, had set them free.